It was the night before Halloween, and the town was thick with the smell of damp leaves and fear. Decades of bloodshed had a way of tainting the air, seeping into the earth like an old wound that refused to heal. The werewolf had always come in the dead of night, under the swollen gaze of the full moon, leaving behind torn bodies, scattered entrails, and the kind of terror that crept into people's bones. This year the town had had enough. We were tired of locking ourselves inside our homes, cowering in the dark, waiting for the thing to come and tear someone apart. So a decision was made, one that felt both desperate and foolish. We'd hunt the beast. There were 9 of us, gathered at the edge of the woods that skirted the town. The sun was setting, its last light spilling over the treetops, painting everything in a blood-orange glow. We were armed with shotguns, rifles, knives, whatever we could find. Silver bullets, of course. That was the folklore, wasn't it? Silver to kill a werewolf. But none of us really believed it. Not until we saw the bodies ourselves. The shredded limbs, the gnawed flesh. No human could do that. As the sun dipped below the horizon, a chill crawled up my spine. We stood in silence, listening to the forest breathe around us, the wind rustling the leaves like whispered secrets. "We stick together," one of the men said, his voice shaking slightly. "No splitting up." Everyone nodded, but there was unease in the air, something I couldn't quite shake. I scanned the faces of the others, their eyes hard and scared. I didn't know all of them well. This wasn't the kind of town where everyone was friendly. Suspicion had long since replaced trust, and fear had carved deep lines into everyone's faces. The plan was simple. We'd track the thing through the woods, flush it out, and kill it before it could take another life. It had always hunted on Halloween night, but we weren't going to give it the chance this year. We were going to find it first. The first scream cut through the night like a blade. I spun around, rifle raised, heart slamming against my ribs. It came from deeper in the woods, where the trees grew thicker and the shadows were darker. The scream wasn't human, too high-pitched, too guttural. It was as if something was being torn apart. A few of the men broke off, rushing toward the sound, ignoring the earlier warning. "Don't split up." I gritted my teeth and followed, my breath clouding in the cool air. The forest closed in around us, the canopy above blocking out the faint moonlight. Suddenly another scream, closer this time, sharp and filled with raw panic. We ran faster. My boots slipped on the wet ground and my breath came in ragged gasps. Something wasn't right. I could feel it in the air like static before a storm. The deeper we went into the woods, the more the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. The air felt wrong, heavy with something dark and primal. When we reached the clearing, I stopped dead in my tracks. One of the men was lying on the ground, his throat ripped open, blood pouring from the gaping wound like a river. His eyes were wide, staring up at nothing, his mouth frozen in a silent scream. I swallowed hard, bile rising in my throat. The others stood around the body, their faces pale, eyes wide with horror. We didn't have time to react before the trees erupted with movement, a blur of fur, claws, and snarling teeth. The werewolf was on us before we even had a chance to fire. It was massive, standing on 2 legs, its yellow eyes glowing in the dark like twin lanterns. Its fur was matted with blood, its claws gleaming in the moonlight. It lunged at one of the men, tearing into him with a vicious swipe of its claws, sending blood spraying through the air like rain. I raised my rifle, my hands shaking so badly I could barely aim. The thing was too fast, too powerful. It wasn't just an animal, it was something worse, something evil. Its growls echoed in my ears, vibrating through my skull. We fired, the crack of gunshots ringing out in the night, but it was too late. One by one, the men fell, their screams fading into the darkness. I turned to run, my legs burning, my lungs screaming for air. But then, as I reached the edge of the clearing, I stopped. The world seemed to tilt, and a horrifying realization slammed into me with the force of a freight train. I couldn't hear the growls anymore. I couldn't hear anything at all. The others, there were no more screams. The forest had gone deathly silent except for the sound of my own ragged breathing. I spun around, eyes wide, searching the shadows for the beast. But there was nothing. No movement, no sound. Only the blood-stained bodies lying scattered across the ground, torn apart like rag dolls. I heard footsteps behind me and turned, relief flooding through me, thinking one of the others had survived. But the figure that stepped out of the shadows wasn't one of the men. It was the werewolf, and it was wearing a familiar face. The familiar face leered at me from the edge of the clearing, its eyes glowing, hunger glinting in their depths. I stumbled backward, tripping over a fallen branch, my mind screaming in disbelief. It couldn't be. It just couldn't. The werewolf took a step toward me, slowly, deliberately, as if savoring the moment. Its claws scraped against the wet ground, each step sending an involuntary shiver down my spine. It was monstrous, towering over me, its breath misting in the cold night air, but that face, I knew that face. One of us. One of the hunters, now twisted into something else. Something wrong, something beyond human comprehension. My heart raced, panic tightening its grip around my throat, making it hard to breathe. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body refused to listen. I was frozen, rooted to the spot, staring into the face of what I could only describe as living horror. The beast's lips curled back, revealing rows of sharp, blood-stained teeth. It took another step forward, growling low in its throat. My fingers fumbled for the rifle slung across my back, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely grasp it. I couldn't outrun this thing. It was too fast, too strong. My only chance was to fight, but how do you fight something that was once one of your own? My mind raced, replaying the last few days, every interaction, every suspicious glance. How long had it been among us? Had it known what it would become? Or was it some kind of curse? Something that took control only when the moon was full and high in the sky. I finally managed to raise the rifle, the cold metal trembling in my grip. I aimed it at the beast, the silver bullet loaded and ready to fire. The werewolf stopped, tilting its head, almost as if it recognized what I was holding, as if it knew the danger. For a split second, there was something in its eyes, something human, and then it lunged. I pulled the trigger, the gunshot echoing through the trees, a deafening crack that momentarily stunned my senses. The bullet hit its target, striking the beast square in the chest. It let out a blood-curdling howl, a sound that tore through the night like the wail of a banshee. It staggered, its massive body convulsing as it clawed at the wound, blood pouring from the gaping hole in its chest. For a moment I thought it was over. I thought I'd won. But then to my horror it stood back up. The beast straightened, its breathing ragged, labored, but its glowing eyes still locked onto mine. The bullet hadn't killed it. It wasn't enough. I fired again, emptying the rest of the magazine into its chest, each shot a desperate plea for survival. Blood sprayed from its body, splattering the trees, the ground, even my face. And still it didn't fall. It took a staggering step toward me, blood dripping from its open wounds, its growls now a sick, gurgling rasp. I could see the life draining from its body, but something was keeping it going. Some primal, otherworldly force that refused to let it die. I turned and ran. Branches whipped across my face, the wind howling in my ears as I tore through the forest, my legs burning, my lungs screaming for air. Behind me I could hear the beast crashing through the undergrowth, its growls growing weaker, but still there, still coming for me. The forest was a maze, every tree and shadow looking the same, every path leading to nowhere. I didn't know where I was going. I just ran, blind and terrified, hoping against hope that I could outrun it, that somehow I could survive. Then I heard it, a faint sound in the distance. Voices, shouts, people. The others from town, maybe? Help? I veered toward the sound, my heart pounding in my chest, my legs moving faster than I thought possible. I burst through the trees and into another clearing, and there they were, a group of townspeople, armed to the teeth, their faces grim and determined. "Over here!" I shouted, waving frantically as I stumbled toward them. They raised their guns, their eyes wide with fear and confusion as they saw me emerge from the trees. I was covered in blood, most of it not mine, but I was alive. Somehow I had made it. I was safe. But then, one of the men, a large, burly figure with a shotgun, stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he looked at me. His face was pale, his knuckles white as he gripped his weapon. He raised the shotgun, pointing it directly at my chest. "Don't move," he growled, his voice shaking with something I couldn't quite place. Fear? Anger? Or something else? I froze, my heart skipping a beat. "Wait, what are you doing? It's still out there. The werewolf—" His eyes never left mine, but there was a flicker of something in them, something dark and terrifying. "No," he said, his voice cold and unfeeling. "It's right here!" The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stared at him, confused, panicked, but then I felt it. The sharp, stabbing pain in my chest, the deep, pulsing ache in my bones. The world around me seemed to blur, the edges of my vision darkening. I looked down at my hands, my blood-stained, clawed hands. No, oh God, no. The realization hit me with all the force of a freight train, knocking the breath from my lungs. The silver bullets, they hadn't worked. The beast hadn't been killed because the beast wasn't the only one. I was the werewolf. I felt my lips curl back in a snarl, my body trembling as the change took hold. The pain coursed through my body like fire, twisting my muscles, snapping my bones, reshaping me into something unholy. I couldn't stop it. The transformation ripped through me, leaving me gasping, hunched over in agony. The men in the clearing, the ones who had been my saviors moments ago, were now staring at me in horror. I could see it in their eyes, the realization dawning on them just as it had on me. The beast they had been hunting all this time wasn't in the woods. It was here, standing right in front of them, and it was me. The burly man tightened his grip on his shotgun, his face pale, his lips trembling. "Shoot it!" he screamed, but his voice was ragged, uncertain. He was terrified, and rightly so. I could feel the beast inside me, clawing to break free, snarling in my chest, desperate to tear them apart. My vision blurred as the change overtook me fully, my hands warping into claws, fur sprouting from my skin. The world around me sharpened, every scent, every sound amplified to a maddening degree. But something was wrong, something worse. This wasn't just a curse. This wasn't just some transformation under the full moon. No, I could feel it in the deepest parts of me, a hunger, an uncontrollable bloodlust that was spreading through my veins like poison. I wasn't just becoming the beast. I was losing myself to it. I growled, the sound low and guttural, not my own anymore. The men raised their guns, trembling, fingers hovering over the triggers, but they hesitated. Somewhere, deep in their minds, they still saw the man I had been. But that man was gone. Ripped away by the curse, torn apart by the monster I'd become. And then the beast took over. I lunged before I could stop myself, claws slashing through the air. The burly man fired, but the shot went wide, the blast echoing in the clearing as I collided with him, knocking him to the ground. The others screamed, the sound filled with panic and disbelief. Blood sprayed across my face as my claws tore through his chest, ripping flesh and bone like they were paper. His scream died in his throat, replaced by a sickening gurgle as his life drained away in a pool of red. The taste of blood hit my tongue, metallic and hot, and it only fueled the hunger. It was insatiable, primal, beyond anything I had ever felt. I turned toward the others, my senses locking onto the pounding of their hearts, the smell of their fear. They were running, stumbling over each other in their desperation to get away, but they wouldn't escape. I could smell their every step, hear the frantic thud of their boots against the dirt. I was on them in seconds. The next man didn't even have time to scream before my claws sliced through his back, severing his spine in one clean motion. He fell, his body limp, collapsing like a rag doll. The blood flowed freely, soaking into the ground, and I couldn't stop myself from bending down, tearing into him with a savage frenzy. But then, a sound, no, a whisper, barely audible through the chaos. It slithered through my mind, cutting through the beast's bloodlust, freezing me in place. A voice low and soft, almost too faint to hear, but unmistakably clear. "You're not the only one." I jerked my head up, blood dripping from my maw, scanning the trees. There was something there watching. It moved just beyond the shadows, shifting, melding with the darkness in a way that was wrong. A figure stepped forward, tall and gaunt, its eyes gleaming yellow in the dim moonlight. My breath hitched. It wasn't a person. It wasn't even human. The figure's skin seemed to ripple, fur sprouting and receding like waves on a black sea. Its face twisted into a sickening grin, revealing sharp teeth too big for its mouth. It was another werewolf. But this one wasn't like me. No, this was different. Older. More dangerous. The figure moved closer, its voice crawling into my head, bypassing my ears entirely. "You thought you were the only one, didn't you?" It laughed, a horrible, raspy sound that sent chills down my spine. "But I've been here, watching, waiting. You didn't hunt the werewolf hunted you." My mind reeled. This ancient, terrible creature had been playing with us the whole time. The deaths, the terror, it had orchestrated everything, luring the town into its trap, pushing us to this very moment. And now, it had me. I tried to speak, to form words, but the beast inside me wouldn't allow it. It wanted blood. It wanted to tear this thing apart, but deep down I knew the truth. I wasn't strong enough. Not against this. The figure circled me slowly, its yellow eyes gleaming with malevolent delight. "Oh, you're strong, but not strong enough. Not yet." Suddenly, the air was filled with the sound of snapping bones, and the figure began to shift again, its body contorting, growing taller, more monstrous. The grin never left its face as it transformed, the sound of its grotesque metamorphosis filling the night air with sickening cracks and pops. My body moved on its own, driven by the beast, ready to lunge, to fight, but before I could react, the figure was on me. It moved impossibly fast, slamming into me with the force of a freight train, its claws sinking deep into my chest. Pain exploded through my body, hot and electric, as it pinned me to the ground, its teeth bared inches from my face. "You'll never escape," it whispered, its voice like broken glass. "Not from me, not from this." I could feel the life draining from me, my vision going dark, but there was no relief, no escape. The last thing I saw before the darkness took me was the figure's face, twisted into that horrible grin, its yellow eyes burning into mine. And then it leaned closer, its breath hot and foul against my ear. Happy Halloween. I woke up to the cold bite of steel around my wrists, the rough scrape of rope digging into my ankles. My head throbbed, the pain deep and relentless, as though someone had split my skull open and left it to rot. My mouth was dry, metallic, tasting faintly of blood. But worse than the pain was the suffocating weight on my chest, the realization that I wasn't dead, not yet. I tried to move, but the chains held me tight, biting into my skin. I blinked through the haze, my vision swimming, and slowly the world around me began to take shape. The damp smell of mildew, the drip of water echoing somewhere in the distance. It was a basement, dark, cold, and cramped, and I wasn't alone. In the far corner, something stirred. The low, rasping breath of the creature echoed in the stillness, reminding me of the nightmare that had unfolded in the woods. It was here, the ancient werewolf, the one that had hunted me, turned me, twisted me into this thing, and now it was keeping me alive for reasons I couldn't yet fathom. "You're awake." The voice slithered through the darkness and my blood ran cold. I turned my head, my muscles straining, and there it was, sitting in the shadows, its yellow eyes glowing like embers in the blackness. The grin from before was gone, replaced by something far worse, amusement. "Why?" My voice cracked barely above a whisper, but it didn't matter. The thing could hear me. It could hear everything. "Why are you doing this?" It stood slowly, towering over me, its hulking form half human, half wolf, its body contorting in grotesque spasms as it moved closer. Every step it took was deliberate, savoring my terror, feeding off it. "You still don't understand?" It crouched in front of me, tilting its head in mock sympathy. "You're not a victim. You never were. You were chosen." I struggled against the chains, fury and fear boiling inside me. Chosen for what? The grin returned, wide and sinister, to join me, to carry on the hunt. My mind reeled. The words didn't make sense, but deep down, I could feel the truth of them gnawing at the edges of my sanity. This wasn't just about survival. It was about something far darker, something that had been set in motion long before I was even born. "The town," it continued, its voice low and cold. "It's been feeding me for generations. The hunt, it's not for sport. It's a rite, a sacrifice. Every Halloween, the beast emerges, and one of you becomes it." My blood ran ice cold. "You mean, yes," it said, leaning in closer, its breath hot and rancid against my face. "The werewolf that came before? That was one of you. The one before that? Also one of you. The curse passes on, year after year, century after century. And now it's your turn." I felt sick, the weight of its words pressing down on me, suffocating. This whole time, the town hadn't just been a victim of the werewolf's attacks. It had been part of a twisted, never-ending cycle of blood and terror. The people, the ones who had been hunting with me, they were doomed too, just like me. "But why me?" I choked out, desperation creeping into my voice. "Why now?" The werewolf's grin widened. "Because you were perfect. You were weak, afraid, just like the others, but now..." It leaned closer, its eyes boring into mine. "Now you're going to be strong. Now you're going to be like me." I shook my head, my mind screaming in denial, but deep down I could feel it. The hunger, the thirst for blood. It was still there, buried beneath the surface, waiting for the next full moon to unleash its fury again. And this time it wouldn't stop. It wouldn't ever stop. The creature rose to its full height, towering over me, and I felt its shadow crawl across my skin like a living thing. You'll kill, you'll hunt, and when the time comes, you'll pass the curse on, just like I did. I wanted to scream, to fight, to break free from the chains and run, but I couldn't. The terror had consumed me, locking me in place, leaving me helpless. I wasn't just trapped in this basement. I was trapped in something far worse, a cycle of horror that would never end. The creature turned, moving toward the stairs, its footsteps heavy on the rotting wood. As it reached the top, it paused, turning its head to look at me one last time. "Happy Halloween," it said, its voice a low, mocking growl. And then it was gone, leaving me alone in the dark, chained and trembling, the weight of the curse pressing down on me like a vice. But as I sat there, something in the back of my mind shifted, something dark and hungry. The full moon was rising, and with it came the transformation. The chains wouldn't hold me for long. The hunger was growing, gnawing at my insides, and soon it would be unstoppable. I was no longer the hunted. I was the hunter. And the town wouldn't see me coming,